You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Los Angeles, what is going on, our UCLA Bruins fan? It already feels like it's been a long offseason, even though it's not the offseason yet. We still do have the Sun Bowl. Bruins are still practicing at their beautiful facility on campus in Westwood. But since there hasn't been games for a while, it feels like a discrepancy here. It's been a while. But thank you all for tuning in. This is the LA Football Show. Excited to talk some bowl news, some recruiting news, some transfer portal news, just some good Bruin talk. So happy you guys are here with us. Joining me, as always, the great alumnus of UCLA, Jamal Madney. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Doing well, Rye. Always excited to talk about my beloved Bruins. What a great week it is. Obviously, huge visits. And then this final chapter, I'm hoping that ends things with this December 14th Regents meeting, of which I'm very familiar with and hoping goes well for our mighty Bruins.
Yes, we will get into all of it. So show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Get you a 50% welcome bonus. I like the Bruins in the Sun Bowl. You can throw money down on that or any of these great college bowl games. We have another announcement involving these bowl games coming later in the show. So make sure to stay tuned and keep your ears peeled for that. But that's betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. So, Jamal, let's start with this region stuff, because obviously this has been a storyline for a long time now, since the news broke back in the summer about UCLA joining the Big Ten. The UC Regent Board was not happy. Governor Newsom, not happy. Cal, not happy. There's all these stories from those groups in particular saying UCLA people are not happy, which I find hard to believe. But anyway, the final kind of attempt / curtain is coming down on Wednesday, when this can finally move on and put it all behind us. But apparently there actually is a play that can keep UCLA from going. Do you believe that? Is it all valid? If so, why? If not so, why?
Ryan, I don't believe it's valid. At the end of the day, the regions really don't have authority to be discussing and deliberating on athletic matters. And beyond that, really over the course of this year, UCLA came to the regions and said that they were facing a budgetary shortfall. And the region's response was essentially, this is out of our purview. This is out of our jurisdiction. This is out of our level of interest. So why don't you guys go figure it out yourselves? And that's essentially what UCLA has done, with USC to go to the Big Ten. And now that the solution has been set, now the regions are like, whoa. This is not really necessarily what we thought, because we believe it impacts another UC school in the form of UC Berkeley. And so it has been a little bit disingenuous at best here, Ryan, in terms of the region's behavior. A lot of political posturing that's been taking place over the last several months. And I think the one thing that they're hanging on to is some caveat in the language of whether or not a decision has a material impact on another UC school, i.e. the only other UC school in the Pac-10, the Pac-12, UC Berkeley. And I think the real key salient point here is that UCLA's move and UC Berkeley's athletic struggles are mutually exclusive events. And I think so much of the political narrative has been that UCLA going to the Big Ten is going to hang Cal out to dry. And those two things just couldn't be further from the truth, because all of Cal's challenges as an athletic program, whether you talk about dilapidated facilities, whether you talk about donor apathy, whether you talk about a lack of talent pipelines in football and basketball, whether you talk about a lack of emphasis on athletics from the perspective of the university, when you talk about the botched FTX deal now in terms of naming Memorial Stadium, all of these things are all self-inflicted that Berkeley is in control of, and really has nothing to do with UCLA, especially when you consider UCLA and USC have essentially subsidized the rest of the Pac-12 schools with the previous and the current media rights deal, because UCLA and USC were perfectly within their grounds in terms of eyeballs and market and viewership to ask for more money than the other schools in the Pac-12 and chose for an equal revenue share to be good Samaritans, to be good citizens of the conference. And so despite having that subsidization, Berkeley is still struggling so much as an athletic department. So A, I don't believe it's in the region's jurisdiction to be deliberating on these matters. And B, I don't think this issue materially impacts Cal, because Cal's struggles were independent of that. So hopefully reasonable heads prevail and the political posturing comes to an end. And by the end of Wednesday evening, December 14th, we will finally be able to truly celebrate a UCLA move to the Big Ten, because that's the right thing to do. That's the fair thing to do. That's the logical thing to do. That's the ethical thing to do. And that's the true thing to do.
Yeah. This may hit too close to home for people. And obviously it's broader and deeper than this at the level I'm going to bring up, but this has the feelings of some of these pro football teams, specifically Chargers. You could talk about the Raiders, about them moving, kind of like where for years, and I know this instance you gave was UCLA kind of went to the board, went to the region, said, hey, we could use some help here. For years, you have the Chargers saying to the city of San Diego, like, hey, we need a new facility. Like, what land can you provide? How can you help? Whether you think that's fair or not. They went and did that. And basically the city came back in a much longer period of time and basically said, sorry, figure it out. And so the Chargers said, okay, we'll move and go to a deal where we can be investing in the world for $1 a year. And now they're the city, obviously not now, but 6 years ago, wait, no. There's got to be other way. We can block this move, this or that. Has a very similar vibe to that, where UCLA was basically told to kick rocks. They did. And now the region's like, oh man, we effed up. And this is a big deal that we're losing not only SC, but also, I mean, they have no control over SC, but we're losing them in this Pac-12 and we got to do everything we can to get them. But from everything I've read, obviously a lot of stuff that we've read and researched is, I don't think pro is the right word, but comes from the viewpoint of UCLA. So maybe that's with some, jaded glasses as well, if you want to say that. But everything I've seen, I feel like there's no possible way that this gets blocked. I think it's more of a formality in terms of, hey, we tried, like we did what we could. But there was the meeting a few months ago, which you attended, and that kind of, I think, put it out there that this was going to happen. This is why they laid out the finances there. This is just one final kind of stamp of Hail Mary attempt. Commissioner George Kliavkoff has done what he can to denounce the move and hope for that. And obviously I think the best thing for him in the Pac-12 was Utah, beating USC to be able to win the conference and play in the Rose Bowl, but that's for a different conversation. So, but I think, Jamal, come Thursday, December 15th, we can finally say, okay, this move is officially happening. It's behind us. We have one more year of Pac-12 play, which will be a lot of fun. There'll be a lot of fun storylines, which we'll talk about, but then it's onward to the Big Ten and looking to the future of UCLA football in a new conference.
No question about it, Ryan. And I think why this has been such a politically charged conversation is that it is the quote unquote historical flagship of the UC school, that is the UC system, that is being left behind in terms of Berkeley, when the entire construction of this system was built from the perspective of Berkeley, and Berkeley kind of being the center of it all, and all of the other campuses essentially being satellite campuses of UC Berkeley. I'm reminded of when Galileo and in the days of 1500 years ago and what have you, when we initially thought the earth was the center of the universe, only to realize that changed, and really the anchor point of our solar system is the sun and it's not the earth, and there's a much bigger universe out there. And I think that so much of the political language, so much of the bylaws, so much of the culture, so much of the politics within the UC system is from the purview of Berkeley being the center of the universe. And this is challenging that, because little brother has an opportunity that's greater than Big Brother ever could have gotten. And then B, Ryan, I think this also creates a precedent where universities within the UC system are thinking about themselves as entities and not as part of just pieces of a larger system. And so this has implications when you want to talk about academic policy, when you talk about medical research policy, when you want to talk about intellectual property, when you want to talk about public-private partnerships, when you want to talk about all of these other things that these UC schools need to think about as viable research universities in this 21st century. Now that they can start, they're feeling empowered to think about themselves as individual universities and not this collective. That's what makes bodies like the region so nervous, because it takes away the collectivist mindset, which so many of these old bureaucratic, historical, public thinking institutions and organizations think of when you talk about how they think about doing their operations. So that's why it's so politically charged. It really has nothing to do with UCLA. It really has nothing to do with football. It really has nothing to do with the Big Ten. It really has to do with the precedent that this could be setting moving forward, because this is the precedent I believe that these UC schools need to be following, and they need to start thinking about themselves as individual entities more. And this becomes that first step in that direction. So yet again, UCLA is at the forefront of something historic, which is so synonymous with their history when you talk about either academics or athletics or social justice or research. And this just becomes another chapter of that illustrious, innovative history.
Yeah, well said. Couldn't agree more. The only other point I'll add, then we'll move on, is, obviously money talks too, which you brought up in the very first point. Obviously that the UCLA is taking a lot of money with them and potentially away from Cal. Because I think if UC Irvine decided to leave the Big West and go to the Mountain West, the UCs would not give two cares about that. Wouldn't even bat an eye. Say, cool, go to the Mountain West, have fun. But the fact that these two universities were kind of created amongst each other, B, everything you said about the politicizing of it, and C, just the money that is changing hands or whatnot, are the three main reasons of why they care so much. And obviously UCLA is a world-renowned institution. That's taking nothing away from UC Irvine, but they're obviously just not the same level of UCLA, especially in athletics. So, all right, let's put a bow on that. Hopefully next episode, which we will record either later this week or next week, we can just say, cool, it's done, it's finalized. Hopefully there's no shocking revelation that happens that we don't see coming. But obviously we'll totally put that end of the chapter book and close it next week when we record again. But let's do this, Jamal. Talk about a current player, and then let's talk about some potential transfers and recruits to kind of end this UCLA show. Current player I want to talk about, and I probably know the answer you're saying, but we haven't talked since the awards came out. And obviously, unfortunately, Zach Charbonnet did not win the Doak Walker. That goes to Bijan Robinson, who, deserved, very, very talented running back. I know where we both stand on that. We did think Zach Charbonnet was the best in the country. So my question for you is, do you think that the voters got it right, that it should be Bijan Robinson? Do you think it was just, a coin flip, either or, both talented? Or do you think, as with many things we've seen throughout the season, it was yet again a lot of that West Coast bias and maybe a lot of voters just not seeing enough Zach Charbonnet film or live game footage that gave him the nod when Texas is at the forefront of all media conversations always?
Yeah, Ryan. I think that they got it wrong. Zach Charbonnet is the best running back in America, and I don't think it's particularly close. I think what hurt Charbonnet was three things. One is he didn't play in 3 games. Yeah. And so that hurt in terms of just being able to pile together even more illustrious statistics, because at the end of the day, stats carry a lot of weight in terms of these individual awards. And it's sort of the first thing we go to and we look at in terms of dominance when you have players at the same position, but they're playing different competition. They're playing in different conferences. They've got different out-of-conference games. There's different situations around them, different sets of offensive lines, different quarterbacks, all of that. So I think statistically that hurt him. Number 2, I think you hit the nail on the head. The lack of the media exposure for UCLA. and the rest of the Pac-12 this year really hurt someone like a Zach Charbonnet, who didn't have the benefit that, say, a Caleb Williams had of being a household name with a household narrative in the offseason by coming to SC with Lincoln Riley and that whole narrative. So regardless of whether the team was being covered or not, you already knew who that individual was. And with Charbonnet, that just wasn't the case. And especially him being more of an understated guy, more of a low-key guy, hard to sort of get that exposure, A, with so much of the conversation at the start of the year with UCLA's attendance, B, the repeated 7:30 starts, really sort of contributed to folks not really knowing enough and appreciating enough about Zach Charbonnet. And then C, I think, Ryan, it speaks a little bit to the ingenuity of Chip Kelly. There was a visualization earlier last week that was shared when it talked about run scheme and run design relative to running backs that had yards after contact. And essentially it was sort of plotting how good, from a running game and a running back perspective, how good is your scheme design and versus how much individual talent does it take for you to be great in terms of breaking tacklers and shedding and doing all of these things. And in terms of run design, UCLA not only was the number one team in the country, but they were the number one team in the country by a standard deviation or more, a statistically significant and enormous amount. And so I think what hurt Charbonnet a little bit was just how much of an innovator people are recognizing that Chip Kelly is again. And it's not like Chip Kelly went anywhere, but I just think the appreciation for Chip is back. And I think that game that in particular UCLA had against Arizona State, where they went for 402 yards rushing without Charbonnet, I think spoke to a lot of what Chip Kelly could do. And you and I have talked about how special Charbonnet is, but because Chip has this zone scheme set up so beautifully that year over year, UCLA should be a top 15 rush offense, and that becomes kind of their ethos and identity to build on. So I think that hurt Charbonnet a little bit in terms of kind of the MVP nature of his season and his characteristics. And I think it was those three things in totality that hurt Charbonnet. But overall, to me, you just have to watch the games. You just have to watch the film. This is the best running back in America. And whoever gets this young man is going to be thrilled to death that they have him. And not only is he going to be an NFL player, not only is he going to be an NFL starter, I believe this is going to be a future rushing champion in the NFL within the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. Yep. Can't wait to see where he lands. Fingers crossed, our Rams. That would be such a great fit. A lot of fun. But, finished all pro second team, obviously had a tremendous season, ended, unfortunately not exactly how they wanted team wise, but have a chance to go out. I don't think he plays in the Sun Bowl, but we'll talk more on that as that game gets a little closer, but a tremendous season. Unfortunate. The last thing I'll say on that, Jamal, that almost irks me a bit because it just shows either people don't watch or don't do the research. We talk a lot about Zach Charbonnet. We do a lot of, for some reason, defending Zach Charbonnet. Like we have to say he's great. And everyone's like, nope, not even top 5, this or that. But the one thing I hear all the time is he just doesn't have the speed, I think, of an elite running back. They're like, oh yeah, he's big and strong, but not the speed. Now, this is according to NFLDraftBuzz.com. So it's not an official time, or it wasn't his combine 40. So obviously we'll see when that comes. But as of now, Bijan Robinson, 40 time, 4.49. Zach Charbonnet 40 time, 4.41. So a faster breakaway speed than the Doak Walker winner in Bijan Robinson. So I just think because he's so big and powerful that kind of masks his speed a little bit. But I mean, the dude's a special running back. He's going to, I think we said this a lot about Drake London last year is we said, and I said for sure, I won't put words in your mouth, but you, I think, tended to agree. I was like, there's no doubt in my mind he will be the first receiver taken. People are either just haven't watched enough because he's on the West Coast, or because USC was so bad last year, or because he got injured after 8 weeks. But there's no doubt his size, skill, speed, hands, blocking, power, all this stuff puts him above the likes of Olave and all these other guys. And sure enough, he went as the first receiver taken. I have no doubt in my mind that Zach Charbonnet, maybe not no doubt in my mind he's the first back taken, but no doubt in my mind he will be one of the first 2 backs taken. And I think he will go into a good situation and be a very, very important player in an offense wherever he ends up right off the bat. And we talk about the Rams, but he may be even a great fit for the Chargers. We just did a whole show. I know UCLA fans, I don't know if you listened to it, we just did a whole show talking about this great Chargers win and their lack of run game still, though, even in that win. And is Austin Ekeler at the point in his career to be the true lead back? Well, imagine having, I know they drafted Isaiah Spiller, imagine having a Zach Charbonnet to pair with Austin Ekeler to take that pressure off. So he fits in either of these LA teams, and it's going to take at least a second-round pick to get him. We talk all the time. I think he's a first-round talent, but just the way the NFL is, it's very rare for a back to go in the first round. So I think he'll probably go in that second round, but we have a lot of months to talk about that. I know you and Will on the Drafts in Session podcast will be talking a lot about that, but bummed you can get the Doak Walker, but phenomenal season and, certainly deserved it. And, we think he should have got it, but what can you do? So if we were voting, Zach, you'd have that award on your shelf.
No doubt, Ryan. And, really excited to see what's to come for him. Charbonnet, in many ways, there's a little bit of a LeBron effect with him. And I think, Ryan, you said it best, because he's so powerful and he's such a great finisher of the runs and he's so physical and he embraces the contact and he just bulldozes you over. And that's the stuff that's 85, 90% of his highlight reels. You forget that he's got the breakaway speed. And I think the element with LeBron, because LeBron is so big and fast and talented and takes everything to the rim. And LeBron is such an elite passer and such a pass-first guy. You forget that he's going to be the all-time leading scorer in the NBA. And I think so there's an element there with Charbonnet that just because his primary identity is something doesn't mean that his secondary identity is not elite. And he is absolutely elite in terms of quickness of feet and having that burstability. I have always compared Charbonnet as a hybrid between a young Jerome Bettis and a Marshawn Lynch. And to me, that comparison is just so apt, because if you go back and look at a young Bus, he loved to finish runs. He was always physical, but he was so quick with his feet and he was so nimble in and out of holes and sort of was able to get to the outside way more often than not. Charbonnet is a much quicker version of a young Jerome Bettis and has tremendous burst when he gets to the second level of a defense.
Yeah, 100%. It'll be fun doing some real comps here in the next few months. I kind of see a little Priest Holmes in him, a little Terrell Davis in him, a lot of great running backs that fit the mold. And last thing I'll say about him, and when you brought up the chart that came out, and everything you said is spot on. I think a lot of people saw that and maybe took some of the mystique away from Charbonnet. And, obviously Chip Kelly's put in a great system. That offensive line played out. And I agree with you. That probably did take some shine off of him. What's frustrating for me, and this is more as a fan than an analyst, is that you can make that case across the board. You look at Blake Corum, phenomenal running back for Michigan. Michigan ran for 252 yards against Ohio State without Blake Corum. In their biggest game of the year on the road, didn't have Blake Corum, ran for 250, won by 20 plus, and Blake Corum was in the Heisman voting. So I see stuff like that. I'm like, all right, well, we could play that game all day. These are top programs with top coaches that are doing different things. You have to really look at the true eliteness of these players and where they bring different aspects, and all deserving. So I don't want to take anything away from John Robinson or Blake Corum or anything like that, but I just hate when I see stuff like that where it's like, oh, they probably got knocked for this. I'm like, okay, well, we can play that game all day if we want to. I talked on you weren't here, and then we'll get into recruits and wrap up. But I talked on our USC show on whatever it was, Friday, about how Pac-12 Coach of the Year was a split between DeBoer in Washington and Jonathan Smith in Oregon State. Well deserved. Take nothing away from those two guys. But to me, it was like, how is it not Lincoln Riley? How is it not? You go from 4-8, you go to the Pac-12 title, you're producing another Heisman. And a lot of people I talked to were like, well, yeah, but he had a Heisman quarterback that transferred in, and so that helped him out. I'm like, well, again, we can play that all day then. Well, Michael Penix Jr. transferred to Washington. I'm not taking anything away from Kellen DeBoer, but he was the leading passer in all of college football. You're not saying that to anything. Oregon State. It's hard to recruit, but John Smith's been there a little while. He's built that program up. Well, didn't have the same expectations. I'm like, they were expected to win 8 or 9 games this year. It wasn't like they were expected to be a dumpster fire. So you can make those arguments every which way. At the end of the day, you have to just open your eyes and say who was the best at what they did and not take into the other factors, which is conversations we've had about the College Football Playoff Committee and all these different things. But anyway, getting besides the point. So let's wrap up with this, Jamal. We'll talk quickly about transfer portal and then quickly about a heavily rated recruit or two recruits. And I'll let you touch on that, but quickly about the portal, just because you weren't with me earlier in the week. Obviously, there's been a lot of talks about, I'm going to butcher it because I've practiced so much, but I know I'm going to say it wrong, but DJ Uwangalele. Is that close?
Yeah, close. It's the closest I've heard on the network. Let's put it that way. Yeah, we're getting there. Okay. We're getting there.
So Clemson transfer, obviously was recruited by UCLA during a cycle, played at St. John Bosco, beat Bryce Young in the, CIF championship game back when they were both here in high school. Your thoughts on him joining obviously it's not a set deal, but your thoughts on if he were to join the Bruins, do you like it? Is it a slam dunk? Do you prefer they go a different direction? Do you like he's on the roster? Just your thoughts overall with DJ.
Ryan, I think Uwangalele is a special talent. There's no question about it. When you talk about guys in year 3 removed from school, there's that famous game between St. John's Bosco and Mater Dei 3 years ago in the CIF championship game where Uwangalele out-dueled Bryce Young, won the game 39-36 for St. John Bosco to win the state title. So it just gives you a sense of what his ceiling was and what his projection was coming into college football, which is why he was so heavily recruited by Dabo Swinney at Clemson to take the keys from Trevor Lawrence and have the keys to the kingdom. And so when you think about Bryce Young, when you think about CJ Stroud, when you think about Caleb, and we think about DJ Uwangalele, all those guys, all very similar ages, all recruited about the same in terms of star and in terms of ranking. Now, with Uwangalele, it just hasn't quite materialized these first 2 years at Clemson on the field. He, I think, has had some struggles with weight. Last year, his first true year as a starter, I think he was a little on the heavier side, made him a little bit more of a stiffer target and made him more immobile than what was initially projected, and that kind of slowed down the offense. This year, he did a phenomenal job of slimming up, but I think reading progressions on offense, going through his reads, as well as the combination of Clemson's offense being a little bit more archaic and not as much of a modern style offense, hadn't really contributed to Uwangalele being a star in college football the way we think about Young and Stroud and Williams and these other guys. So I think it's a win-win situation. What I love about Uwangalele is what a teammate he is, what a leader he is. Everyone at Clemson, whether it's his teammates, whether it's his coaches, whether it's administration, just has nothing but the most impeccable things to say about this young man, about how he has handled being benched multiple times over the course of the last 2 years, the type of teammate he is, how he shows up for the program, how he shows up for his brotherhood. And it's just all of the values that align so perfectly with the type of recruit that Chip Kelly is looking for when he talks about books and ball, when he talks about the 4 legs of a chair being athletic, academic, social, spiritual. DJ Uwangalele fits that mold perfectly. And I think if you put him into a Chip Kelly system that is more run first and playing off of that, along with just the exceptional mind that Chip is, in terms of the quarterback laboratory that he would have access to, I think his performance would go to another level than we have seen from him in Clemson. So I love the opportunity to have DJ Uwangalele as that next quarterback after DTR and really solidify UCLA, Ryan, as a place that is going to win consistently year over year and has a strategy to be able to do so, where the floor on this program is 8 to 9 wins. And I think that's where we're all hoping UCLA football gets to, is that when you look at campus, when you look at facilities, when you look at resources, when you look at alumni, when you look at pageantry, there's really nothing that USC football has that UCLA football doesn't have, especially if and when this move to the Big Ten goes through and you have $100 million coming in terms of media rights deal. There really is no intellectual property secret sauce that is happening across town that UCLA can't tap into. And so there's no reason UCLA cannot be a floor 8 to 9 win team every year with the opportunity to be competing for conference championships if not every year, every other year. And I think that's the program we want to sort of get to. And Uliungalale coming to UCLA would be a huge step in that direction of showing that this wasn't just the ceiling for Chip Kelly, but this is the beginning of year-over-year success that only he uniquely has been able to tap into since the days of Terry Donahue.
I love how you said his name about 11 times just to prove you can say his last name correctly. Well done, sir. Well done. But I agree. And last thing I'll say is, two things with DJ coming here. I think one, you can look at, there's a lot of times in college football where great players can go to great programs and great coaches, and it's just not a fit. I mean, it's not like Clemson's a bad program. It's not like Dabo Swinney's a bad coach. Might not mean DJ's a bad quarterback. It just isn't a fit. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, obviously very different circumstances, but we saw, Burrow at Ohio State wasn't able to get on the field, wasn't able to beat out some of those QBs, goes down to LSU, and obviously the rest is history. So I'm not saying that's what can happen, but that's just, people need to think like, oh, he was a bum at Clemson, like we wouldn't want him. Like, no, sometimes it's just not a fit in football and in life, and that can certainly change. The other thing that I think, just when you look at football, yes, he did not have the career he was hoping to have at Clemson. Yes, he was benched a few times, but what he can take from there is he did play in some big time games. And currently, as this UCLA QB room is constructed, and there's another potential recruit, which we'll get to here to wrap the show up, 0 big time game. Justin Martin, obviously, true freshman, big time recruit, tons of talent, but obviously he hasn't logged a snap yet. Chase Garbers has played in a couple spot starts when DTR was injured, or a couple snaps here and there, but he hasn't. I mean, the biggest game he played was on that 3 plays against Oregon last year when he came in for an injured DTR. So no big time games. DJ has at least played in some big time games over the course of his career thus far, and he would bring that experience to this UCLA program. I mean, you could argue he's even played in bigger games than DTR played in the 5 years he was here. So that, I think, is an invaluable proposition that not a lot of people may be thinking about. And who's to say he wins the job? I mean, maybe some of these younger guys end up beating him out, but I think the whole iron sharpen iron, QB competition would be really, really good for this team. And that'll be an easy transition, Jamal. But before we get into it, I got to at least mention, I talked about, surprise that we're going to be promoting here, but we are hosting an LAFB Collegiate Bowl pool. I don't really know what to call it, but we're hosting a pool on the network for everyone out there to join. It's run by Run Your Pool. Run Your Pool, I'm sure many of you heard of it. It's the home of competition, bringing sports fans together to connect, compete, and make every game matter more. And so, with bowl season here, we're teaming up with Run Your Pool. We're hosting a Pick'em challenge. It's super simple. You enter, we will have a link provided below. So click on that link. It's basically play.runyourpool.com/LA-football-network. You'll pick the winner of every bowl game, starting with the Bahamas Bowl, ending with the national championship. Person with the most picks right wins. Picks are made straight up, no spread. Signing up is completely free, takes less than 60 seconds. And guess what? The winner takes home $1,000. So kind of cool that we were able to partner with this, have a lot of fun, costs you absolutely nothing to join. Tell your friends, get everyone to join. The more people in here, the more fun we can start building community and stuff like that. And if you win $1,000 for nothing, just signing on 60 seconds, picking every game for fun. Doesn't cost you a dime. I think everyone out there does a pool around this time of year and probably has to pay to get in. This one doesn't do that. So again, I'll have the link below, but if you're listening and don't want to go on here and look for it, it is play.runyourpool.com/LA-football-network. So Jamal, that'll be fun. So
can't wait, Ryan. And it's such a fun, I just love the concept of being able to build community through sports, because sports is the one human endeavor, and it might be the only one that can cut across religion, ethnicity, gender, so, economics, geography, culture, all of these things. It's the one topic where my godfather had always told me this, and it rings so true. It's the one topic where if you're in a big company and you get in on the elevator, it's the one topic where the CEO and the janitor can talk about something on an equal footing and have a great time. There's really no other topic. There's really no other element in life that allows you to do that without feeling some inhibition, some barrier in terms of truly inclusiveness about who you are or your positionality in the world. And so that's what makes sports so special. It's why we do what we do, Ryan, and why I love organizations and companies that bring community together through sports.
Yep. And that's what the LAFB Network is all about, community through sports. And so now we can do that and play along. And hey, hopefully someone will win, not someone, but hopefully you listening right now wins $1,000 right before, well, wouldn't be before, but right after Christmas. So you can pad the pocketbooks there for a spring break vacation potentially. So, all right, Jamal, let's end with this. Unless you had anything else to add.
Dante Moore. We got to get to Dante Moore.
We're ending with Dante Moore, highly recruited quarterback who has committed to Oregon. To my knowledge, hasn't decommitted, but now has visited UCLA. Just posted today at the time of this recording. This is Monday, the 12th, a picture on the UCLA campus with Chip Kelly. Obviously, 5-star recruit out of Michigan, uber talented. And, we got the hashtag trending Dante to LA. It's becoming like it might be a thing. We just talked about DJ maybe transferring, Justin Martin, Chase Garbers, now Dante Moore in the mix. I mean, regardless, the fact this is even a conversation, like how exciting is this potential of a quarterback room here? And what's your thoughts on Dante Moore overall?
Well, Ryan, what's so significant and exciting here about Dante Moore is a couple things. Just for our viewers that don't know this, we're talking about the number 1 player in Michigan for the class of 2023, the number 5 quarterback in America, the class of 2023, and the number 11 overall prospect in the class of 2023. He is the reigning National Player of the Year of Michigan, 2-time state champion in Michigan for MLK Senior High School, and was the MVP of the Elite 11 quarterback camp this past summer, which brought together the top recruits and the top prospects for that particular recruiting cycle year. So you're talking about an absolutely significant blue chip stud prospect. It would be the highest recruit UCLA has ever gotten, according to the rating agencies. Yes, scored higher than even the great Josh Rosen from 8 years ago. And it would just set up UCLA for an enormity of success. The comp right now with Dante Moore is Marcus Mariota. And what people forget in this whole narrative about Chip and the transfer portal and being this analytical guy is that the greatest player in the history of Oregon football was recruited by Chip Kelly. And Chip Kelly recruited Marcus Mariota before he ultimately left for the NFL as taking the keys to the kingdom of Oregon moving forward with Mark Helfrich. And so Dante Moore symbolizes Chip does not do this often. He does not put an emphasis on out of high school recruiting unless the kid is absolutely special across what we call his 4 dimensions of success, or it's someone that is going to be so instrumental and such a great marriage to his offense. And Dante Moore fits that bill. This would put UCLA on a trajectory of national relevance, of national expectations, and really use the DTR years as a building block to be a perennial power. And so this could be the most monumental get UCLA has ever gotten in the 21st century in the form of Dante Moore. And that's what makes this so significant. He has been committed to Oregon since the spring and continues to have conversations with Dan Lanning and that coaching staff. I think the combination, Ryan, of Kenny Dillingham leaving Oregon and taking the Arizona State job has opened the door, coupled with Chip's eagerness to actually recruit, has really made this very enticing. He had an incredible visit this weekend by all indications, got to try on the UCLA swag in the top-notch UCLA facilities, in the locker room, took some great pictures with folks. And now we will see in the next 10 days and into the end of December, beginning of January, into this signing period, what actually happens with him. Oregon still feels very confident in their ability to retain him, but UCLA would not make such a significant push if they did not believe they had a credible opportunity. He is far and away the prize. If you talk about the four individuals, DJ, Ethan Gargers, Justin Martin, or Dante Moore, Moore is the most talented of these four by a lot. Martin, for all of his exploits, he was a four-star recruit. Everyone talks about the 13 touchdowns in high school. There is a pretty significant gap from a rating agency's perspective between Moore and Martin. Gargers is a great kid, but he hasn't really been able to see the field the last several years. And then obviously we've talked about DJU. To me, it's DJU or Dante. We get either one of these two guys, we're set up for an enormous amount of success next year. And my preference would be Dante Moore.
Well, 2 points, and I agree with everything. I was going to bring up Dillingham, leaving for ASU. And I think that's probably why this even kind of began to creep into Dante Moore's mind and do that. I think the fun side of it is the fact that, in probably definitely not next year, because obviously Caleb Williams coming back for SC, but in 2 years we could have the Dante Moore versus Malachi Nelson in LA. Like, what a fun QB battle. We had so much fun with Caleb and DTR this year, but those two young prospects, that would be so much fun to be able to cover and see those guys play. And the last point about why I think, Jamal, maybe the thought of UCLA has kind of piqued again the interest of Dante Moore and wanting to go to that school. And we talked about this back in August when the news was first announced of UCLA going to the Big Ten. And we talked about, everyone's talking about the travel time and this. We're like, this is going to be a big game changer in recruiting. As great as the Pac-12 is, we've loved the Pac-12. We're not throwing any shade at the Pac-12. But this is going to help recruiting because all the kids in California, that they're still playing their home games in California. It's not like the institutions are moving. So it doesn't affect anything in California recruiting. But now you open up the entire Midwest because of all those home games in the Midwest. And guess what? Dante Moore's from Michigan, as you alluded to. There could be a small factor here of him saying, okay, by my sophomore year, UCLA will be playing at Michigan, at Ohio State, at Michigan State, all within driving distance of my friends, my family, all this. And maybe that hasn't, but I think it's worth exploring and worth mentioning that could absolutely be a tool in this, that once that news drops and is announced on hopefully the 14th, this is a dead, done deal, UCLA going, we may see Dante Moore flip. And then I will be very loud saying that was a big factor why he flipped. A, the Dillingham move, I think, hurts Oregon, but B, the fact that UCLA is playing in the Big Ten in 1 year and he'll be able to play in front of friends and family, I think is a big, big deal. We made mention of that back in August. And Jamal, I think this could be the first real instance of us seeing that truly have an effect along with everything else you said.
Ryan, it's such an excellent point. And I think it alludes to something even deeper than that when you talk about sort of the behaviors and the ties. There is a tremendous tie between the University of Michigan and UCLA. Mm-hmm. People think of those two schools very similarly. Remember, Ryan, we were going to Vegas talking about what are sort of the most popular schools where people want to go to. Invariably, Michigan and UCLA get compared in a similar breath. And when you look at the composition of Michigan right now, they're a power back-to-back CFPs, but I don't think top recruits necessarily want to go play for Jim Harbaugh, given they're a run-first defensive type of team. And you saw kind of the lack. Obviously, McCarthy had a big game against Ohio State, but they are much more, hey, we're going to throw it under 20 times, run the ball, play action. A guy as dynamic as Dante Moore, he's not going to want to go play at Ohio State being a Michigan kid, and he's probably not going to want to play at Michigan. So he's like, well, who's the closest school to Michigan in terms of values, in terms of the experience, but also allows me to unlock all of my superstar potential, and that is UCLA. Earlier this year, Ryan, we had DTR's mom, Miss Dr. Melva Thompson-Robinson, on the show. She has talked so much about how her affinity for Michigan growing up in the Midwest, and DTR was thinking Michigan, UCLA. We've got our great friend of the network, Brian Price, the legendary UCLA Brian Price. He's out living in Michigan. He tells us all the time about how similar Michigan and UCLA really are. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this now with UCLA and the Big Ten, particularly with this very interesting tie between Michigan and UCLA being such comps as universities. And the fact that one school has such an offensive innovator in Chip Kelly that, say, Jim Harbaugh isn't, I think is going to open up a very unique door of possibilities for UCLA moving forward. It's a very exciting time for the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. So hashtag Dante to LA. Let's see it happen. A lot of exciting things going. And you still have a bowl game coming up, which we'll talk about more next week and the week after that. So went a little longer on this one, but it was a great show. A lot to get into, which I love doing this, Jamal, because beforehand we're like, oh, what can we talk about here at the offseason? Here we go for 45 minutes talking about all these different things, but a lot of exciting stuff. Make sure to join our pool. Link is below. Make some picks, hopefully win $1,000. Text our community. Text UCLA to 31032 to join our UCLA Bruins community. And as always, stay safe, be well, go Bruins. This is the LA Football Show for Jamal Madney. I'm Ryan Dyrud. Talk to y'all soon.